Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we have ourselves our first Civivi knife. This is the Civivi Asticus, I think is how it's pronounced, but honestly I'm not entirely positive. This knife is not mine. It was provided by the manufacturer as part of a pass-around group that they're running, and so I'm not going to get to keep this one, but full disclosure, I just want to make sure everybody knows that this is not my knife, and it did come to me from the manufacturer. I've tried not to let that bias me too much, and I think I've done a pretty decent job with that, but I think it's, worth noting. So what we have here is a Civivi knife, which is by We Knives. Here's the little C logo. It's the only logo anywhere on here, by the way, which is fantastic. But it's by We Knives, who is a well-known Chinese manufacturer of knives. It's a 3.8-inch blade. It's D2 steel. It's got full skeletonized liners with these nice jade, natural, whatever you want to call them, G10 scales. It's a flipper. It's running on caged ceramic bearings. And I have not taken this apart because it isn't mine. So I'm not going to try to, damage something that's not mine. So I haven't taken it apart, so I'm not entirely sure if this is running exactly as smooth as it possibly could, but it's pretty good for now. So let's start with the things that I really like here. First and foremost, that. Look at that blade. That thing is fantastic. It's super slicey. This thing is hollow grind. It's D2 steel, so it's, good to go. It's probably, in my opinion, the best budget steel. Other people might disagree, but it's my favorite budget steel. This thing is fantastic. It looks good. It functions. It's fairly robust in some ways. It's got this beautiful, almost like full-length swedge down the whole thing. I really like the look of this blade. It's definitely holds an edge because, again, it's D2 steel. And I love it. It's fantastic. I've not had any problems with cutting anything, and I've cut boxes. I've cut a couple other things that are pretty, nothing super heavy duty, but, no signs of the edge dulling in any way at all. It's pretty easy to maintain D2 steel with just, regular sharpening, regular care. It's not difficult at all. D2 is a great budget steel. So I really like that, and it's also it just looks good, and it cuts because it's hollow ground. Look how thin this thing is behind the edge. I don't know if you can see that. It's fairly thin behind the edge. I mean, just fantastic. I would say this is one of the slicier knives out there. It's 3.8 inches, this blade, so it's not small. It's very not small. I mean, it's big. It's definitely big, but it's nice. It cuts, and that was probably one of the bigger surprises for me is how well this thing still cut. So I'm also going to say, I think maybe next for me is the action here is just great. It fires every time. Every time. Now, I will say this is not a push button flipper. You push as hard as you want. It'll just pop a little bit. But light switch, boom. Fires every time. You have some knives, some flipper knives are more like of a push button action and won't flip if you light switch them. This one does now after some serious work, but this one is definitely just a light switch flipper, but it does work fantastic. It's not going to drop shut, even though it has this huge blade. You can wiggle it down. It's not the drop shuttiest knife of all time, but it does work, and it's fantastic. The deploy is reliable. It fires every time. I love that. Next here, let's talk about some of the details. This is a budget piece. This is Civivi Knives, which is We Knives' budget brand. This is a budget knife, but this thing right here, this pivot logo here is inset. It's nice. It's smooth. It doesn't get in the way at all. There's very few screws to see either side anywhere. This is there's a lot going on here that's just fine detail work that you look at and you're like, wow, that's pretty cool. I mean, I can't believe this is a cheap knife. I mean, this is, for the knife world anyway, cheap knife. And to have something like that in a budget piece is great. There's no sharp edges anywhere here other than the knife. I can grab anywhere and none of this. I mean, this is these are exposed liners, by the way, and this does not hurt your hand because they're rounded. They're smooth. It's great in hand, and I love that. Also, I mean, even so, another fine detail thing. The lanyard hole, unlike some companies, not naming any names, unlike some companies, the lanyard hole isn't just a gigantic hole, making a hole in the liners and the scales and making it look terrible. It's hidden back here. It's a recessed little lanyard, like loop almost. Doesn't obtrude, doesn't bother me, and in fact, I like it because you can still have a lanyard attachment point without ruining the looks or the lines of the knife. So the detail work here is great, and I love that they've done that in a knife that's a cheap knife. This knife is $55. As of right now, you can buy this on pretty much any website. $55 for this knife. Wow. That price is amazing to me for this much. This is a 3.8-inch blade. This is a big, beefy knife. $55. I'm down. I think that's great. Also, it comes in a ton of variants because it's a Civivi knife. They have it in, I think there's a blue color, there's an all black, there's a carbon fiber with a Damascus blade. If you'd rather have a Damascus style steel blade instead of the D2, there's endless varieties to Civivi knives, and this one has a bunch of different ones, and I love that that's an option. Most companies put out one variant of a knife, and then that's it. That's all you ever see, and I like that this one immediately is available in multiple different variants, and that's great. Next, the liners are really heavily skeletonized here. Let me see if we can show this off with a little bit of light here. You can see the skeletonization through because of the this is like almost see-through G10 here. You can see how heavily skeletonized that is, and that really cuts down on the weight of this thing. It makes it a lot lighter than I actually thought it was going to be. My first inclination when I grabbed it was, oh, it's a heavy knife, because, I was thinking, okay, it's heavier than like a PM2. But at the same time, it's substantially larger than a PM2. I mean, look at that. Look at the blade length here. The handle lengths are almost the same, but the blade length is substantially larger, and yet this thing, not much heavier. Let's figure out how not much heavier. Just a moment. I realize I left my scale on the other side of the table here. Reaching. Still haven't gotten it. There we go. Oh, what a day. So we start zeroing the scale here. So it's 3.95 ounces, which is, almost 4 ounces for a 3.8-inch blade. It's a little heavier than a PM2, 3.79, but it's a lot more blades. So, it's... But, for instance, actually, let's continue where we're at here, because... Will you zero? Why won't this thing zero? There we go. A Shaman is almost 5.3 ounces. So this is a lot lighter than that. And I just, is it perfect? No, absolutely not. But I think it's a lot lighter than it could be, and it's all because of those skeletonized liners. Which, again, they didn't have to do, but it's another fine detail that you sort of really like to see out of a company. Pocket clip here. Also, great feature. Deep carry clip. Look at how deep that is. I mean, it's literally to the edge of the knife. This thing disappears completely in your pocket. It has a great carry profile because very thin along here, very thin here, very thin here. I mean, in comparison, it completely disappears behind the PM2. Completely. So it carries really well right out of the box, and the deep carry clip is a big part of that. I like that it's a black deep carry clip, too. I know a lot of people are not big fans of coated clips, painted clips, black clips, whatever you want to call them. But I like that this is black because it's much more subtle. I find shinier clips can be a little bit attention-grabbing, and this guy right here is not. It's very great. So, getting back to that non-shoutiness of that clip, let's talk about the non-shoutiness of the whole knife here in general. What do you not see on this blade? Oh, that's right. There's no logos. There's no anything. Nothing. Everybody these days puts a logo somewhere on a blade. Not there. Oh, there's one. Nope. Not this one. This has one logo on the whole blade, on the whole knife, and it's that. Just the Civivi logo on the pivot. I think that's fun. I think that's awesome. I'm so sick of companies, Cold Steel, Spyderco, that put so much crap on the blade that, I think it takes away from the look of the knife. There's no billboarding on the clip. Oh, it's great. This is great. I love how little billboarding there is. There's no need for any of that, and they don't have it here. Next, the ergos here. Ergos are fantastic. This thing disappears in your pocket, but in your hand, it fills it nicely. Everywhere I grab it, you grab it down here, it feels great. You grab it with the choil, which, by the way, is a fantastic finger choil. You grab it with the choil to get more precision work done. Great, fantastic. This thing is awesome. I absolutely love the ergos here. There's no hot spotting for me. I squeeze the crap out of it, and it doesn't hurt. I mean, it'll make a little mark here and there, but it doesn't hurt. There's no pain here. Even from the liners, which, they're exposed liners, so you might think, oh, it could be a little bit problematic, but it's just not. So now let's talk about one other thing here, which is that this thing has a fantastic flipper tab. If you look, it's got jimping, but it's aggressive, but it's not sharp in any way. This stuff, nothing. And it's not that big. Let's go back to a smaller flipper knife. Look how much bigger the flipper tab is on the Spyderco Mantra 2 here than it is here on this Civivi Asticus. Boom. Easy flips because that flipper tab is so great, but it's not huge, and I really like that. Lastly, even though liner locks are not my favorite kind of knife, because I do tend to get bit by knives with locks in the cutting path, I haven't done that with this one on this hand. I have cut myself with it, but we'll leave that alone for now. This actually feels almost a little bit more like a frame lock because of how much the liners stick out here and how easy it is to access this lock bar. It actually feels almost a little bit more like a frame lock than it does like a liner lock. And I really like that. And it's all just to do with the placement of the liner and how they stick out. And it's fantastic. It's really well done. So even though it's a liner lock and it's not my favorite lock, I think it feels great because it's more like a frame lock. So things I like less here. So it is still a big knife. It is still a big, heavy knife. It's not the heaviest knife. It's not the lightest knife. But it's still got some heft to it. I handed this to my wife, who isn't a knife person, and the first thing she said to me was, "Wow, that feels heavy." So it feels big. Even though it isn't that heavy, it does feel big. So, that can be a good thing or a bad thing. Some people like a bigger feeling knife, and for them, yeah. All right, next. This has this deep carry pocket clip, which, again, I love a deep carry pocket clip, but it doesn't have the recessed screws. And the clip itself is actually riding on top of the liner, but that's not as big a deal to me as the screws, because what the screws sticking up like that mean is you stick it in your pocket and it stops at the screw, and then you have to push it down a second time to get it to ride. Does that end my life or end the world for anybody? I don't think so. I think it's fine. But it just is the kind of thing that I know Civivi can do this. They've done it. I've seen other knives they have. I've been doing a lot of research on Civivi knives since I got this thing. And they have a ton of other knives that have deep carry clips, and some of them have recessed screws. So I don't understand why they wouldn't just use the recessed screws. But they didn't, and I think they should have, and they should continue to use those in the future. This also has one other issue here. There's no jimping anywhere back here. Now, when you're opening it, You're glad your finger's not landing on jimping, which, by the way, you can fail to flip this if you try. But your finger's not landing on jimping back here, so that's nice. But maybe the back of the blade should have just like a teeny bit, just like maybe like a couple. Just because when you're holding down on this, your thumb can slide all over this. Now, the rest of the knife is really grippy, and it fits well in hand, and it's probably not going to slide out and do anything. I don't think it's going to be an issue for anybody. But it's the kind of thing that, like, it's just a small detail, and I think it could have improved it just a little bit. Now, here's something I'm not a fan of that absolutely doesn't matter in any way at all to the function of this knife. The pivot screw on the non-show side sticks up quite a lot. I don't know if you can see that. It sticks up maybe like 1 to 2 millimeters. And, I sort of prefer all my hardware to be as flush as is possible. Here on your PM2, notice? Flush hardware, completely flush. This could use that, because it's flush here. Why is it not flush on the backside? Does it really matter? Probably not, but it just seems kind of weird. I don't know. Now, also, I love the look of this blade. I've said that already. I think it's fantastic. The handles look mostly all right to me, but one small annoying niggle for me is the lack of symmetry here. At the end, down here, it's almost the same amount of space on both sides. It looks pretty smooth going up, and then you get up here, and there's this huge spot there between the liner and the scale, and a tiny spot over here. Why don't they make this just a little bit larger on this side and just a little bit bigger over here so that it's more even? Again, this is just a complete nitpick, but I will admit to having some minor obsessive tendencies, and that one is definitely gets to me. Finally, the action on this knife, which I have not done anything to. I haven't taken it apart, I haven't oiled it, I haven't lubed it, I haven't done anything because it's not my knife. I think it's just a little bit grippy and gritty on the close. Oops, sorry, I bumped the camera there. Can you hear that? It's just a little bit gritty. And I feel like maybe with some cleaning and lubrication, you could probably fix that. But as it came, it could use to be just a little bit smoother. I mean, I've got other knives that you can't hear anything when you close them. And then you've got this thing, which makes just a little bit of noise, and it doesn't really fall shut. You can get it to close with a wrist flick, but it's not perfect. And so I just, they could have improved it. And a little bit of wrist action down there. It'll close, but even though it has this heavy blade, it's not perfect. And so I just think it could be improved. Now, maybe I could do that myself, but again, it's not my knife, so I'm not going to do that. All right, so now we get into the things I really don't like. First one is not actually a knock on this knife in particular as much as it is on every single knife that comes in this jade G or translucent or natural or whatever color G10 you want to call this. Okay, knife companies, listen to me right now. When you put out a product that looks like this, people expect it to glow in the dark. They do. Everything I have that's not a knife that is this color glows in the dark. Every knife I have that is this color does not. Why? Why can't they just make this shit glow in the dark? Maybe it's a bigger issue than I think. Maybe it's harder. I don't know. But it should. I think it should. And if you want one that doesn't glow in the dark, buy another color. This one, I think, should. And I think all knives in that color should. It's not, again, a knock on this knife only, but in general. Next, I have another complaint about this that, again, is not really on this knife. This thing is made in China, which carries a bit of a stigma here in the U.S. Though, in the knife world, companies like We and Civivi and Rayot and Artisan Cutlery and some of the other ones, some of the bigger ones, they're really definitely changing some of that stigma to knife people. But to the rest of the world, to the rest of the people in the United States, this knife made in China, ooh, Chinese, yes. But again, this knife is fantastic, so whatever. But the real issue I have is it kind of left me feeling sad. Only because I don't think we in America could make this knife for $55. If this was made here, it'd probably be a $150 knife, maybe more. It is comparable in a lot of ways to some of the knives I have that are in the $200 range, much less this, which is $55. And it made me feel a little sad, and that's, again, something I'm not a big fan of. Time for my actual biggest gripe about this knife, which, again, is not entirely this knife's fault. It's 3.8 inches. I can't carry that outside my house here. I'm stuck with things under 3.5. It has to be under 3.5, or I can't carry it outside my house. Why? I don't know. Because people are stupid and make stupid knife laws. But for me, it means this knife is something I can't own. I can't use because I can't carry it outside my house. I have a couple knives that are definitely too big for that as well, and I've held on to them because they're fantastic, amazing, hard-working knives. This one would probably fall into that category for me. So that's my probably biggest complaint about it. It's just too big for me to carry outside my house. So let's talk about my final verdict and, would I recommend this to people? Yeah. Wow. I still can't believe they made this knife and they're selling this knife for $55. This was my first knife from one of the big Chinese manufacturers. I've never handled one. I've never held any of them. I've never owned one. And the reason is I can't find anywhere locally here that sells them. So I was kind of hesitant. I've handled one now, and I have to say, this will not be my last one. I'm already trying to figure out which one I would like to use as the one I add to my collection first. This thing is fantastic. If you live in an area that doesn't have stupid 3.5-inch laws, this is 1,000% a definite recommend from me. The only thing holding me back right now is that I know a lot of people are trying to buy, if you're in America anyway, are trying to buy more American-made products. With the COVID-19 thing and everybody, all small businesses and American companies, everybody's struggling right now. So I get that. I do. And so you might not want to buy something made in China because you're feeling, oh, I don't know, I have to buy American. But I can say you can still support American companies by buying this from an American retailer. You buy this from a Blade HQ, a Knife Center. I don't know who else sells it, but I'm sure most of the major online American retailers sell it. If you buy this from somebody online and you buy it from an American company, you're still supporting an American company. Even though you're giving your money to the Chinese manufacturer, you're also supporting the American company that's selling it. So I think if that's your issue, I'd get past that real quick. This thing is awesome. It's great. And honestly, if it wasn't for the 3.8-inch blade and I can't carry that outside my house, one of these would be in my mailbox tomorrow. So that's, I guess, my final verdict here is, yeah, this is a fantastic knife and I highly recommend it to anybody. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this Civivi Asticus, which I think is how it's pronounced. But again, I could totally be wrong and butchering the heck out of that. But yeah, it's great. And I hope you enjoyed it. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.